Call to order our HPC work session on January 25th, 2024. And would staff like to start and lead us off where we left off, or should you just jump right in?
I think we can try. It's been a while, right? How long?
Yeah,
has it
I think that a curveball has arrived. When I
Is that
sat
what
down,
Pam was referring to?
the staff has had out some of the work that we thought we were finished with. In my red marks, I'd put a big yellow arrow that said "Stopped review on 12/21" after a couple pages. But there are some comments from the staff in purple and green that we should probably review right from the start.
So I'll start off. And apologies for not, I saw David's note, and two, I just had a chance to go through this today. So that's my apologies. Just really go through the information. And David, I made it well known again when you sent your email. I think we owe a great gratitude that David has taken this initiative to go through there. And it's, I wish we had had a chance to get to this a little earlier. And I may be off base, but I know there was a lot of discussion at the last work session. I don't know that there was any maybe official consensus derived. Maybe my head was in another place in that meeting. So just we wanted you guys to have staff's input in a document instead of us just kind of talking in a forum. So you saw my notes when David sent out his email that going through this exercise many times over several years in different capacities and different documents. I'm not even going to mention the 2016 through 2019 exercise, Mr. Farrell, of when we went through this. So I think a little, just kind of having a common goal or objective known and established by the group so we can really start making some progress. Because it does, even to me, feel like we haven't really gone anywhere yet, other than David putting in an enormous amount of effort on his end, even though he says he has the time to do this, over probably, the past year and a half, right? So he was even working on a document that we already brought revisions back in the fall of 22, I believe, that were the latest round that were adopted.
Yeah, 22.
And two, there are some areas in here that staff has really identified, which is different from what you had, sort of the charge you had started on, David, where we think we really want the HPC to jump in and give us some guidance, and let's really put some meat and flesh on our commercial and industrial standards. I think that's where we have glaringly have a big gap in our historic standards. Some of that based on some experience that we've had, but going back to 2019, I can tell you it was just at a time that we just had to get something in because we were operating under an old set of standards and guidelines that were even more glaringly overlooking some areas. So we've been sort of systematically ticking, at the new format. This is still the new format to me. This is the 2019 format that we're working under. So that's still new to me. So we just want to make sure that you guys have that, and we wanted to circulate some informational blogs that you're able to grab from the School of Government. They kind of you guys have a foundation of kind of where we're coming from when we talk a little bit about those all-important words, should and must, and why these are supposed to be considered guidelines, even though they're having to be titled standards these days, and they're not the typical development standard that we all think of and live with, whether they be through an architectural review board or typical zoning code or other codes of ordinances. That being said, there's definitely areas where we need to be extremely clear and firm, I think, but there's also information in there that directs us all to know that our overall charge is that congruity standard within the entire district. So not with each individual structure per se, it's everything that's around. And there needs to be some flexibility in that, with the understanding the onus is always on an applicant who's coming before the HPC to present that case. Whether or not they do something that's a should or a must, or however they move the commission to feel that they need to make a finding of fact based on whatever those adopted standards are. So this really is the intent is not to deter or take steps back. I just feel like, and this falls on me from a staff perspective, that we haven't articulated well where our points are or what feedback we would like the commission as a whole to have as we continue to go forward. So that was the intent, and again, this was off the press as of 2:32 p.m. So again, I'll take responsibility for that, but, you know, it's a marathon. I don't think it's a sprint, and I know we have a goal of trying to get this done before your current term ends.
I'm
We'll
not
call that a
sure.
common
I
goal.
think the big question is, what does get this done mean? You know, it's taken 1.5 years to get about halfway through existing structures.
And I agree.
We'll get
It's
to the
been
end of the book,
frustrating. We've spent 2 work sessions massaging verbiage that don't really tell you what you're supposed to do or not. And admittedly, we've got some new people at the table, right? Raise your hand if you were here a year ago. Wow, look at you.
That's a quorum.
Thankful for that. You know what I mean? So that always impacts it. At least it has in my experience. And we're fortunate, too, now that we have Michael and Pam with us. We have Roxanne and Angelique and Kara. She wasn't here a year ago, but she's on the commission. And we're about to grow by 2 new staff members, which hopefully by the time they come with us, they're just going to, HBC members, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was going to say that, wow.
Sorry. No new staff members. Make that clear. No new staff members. HR will be glad to hear that, too.
Well, when I embarked on this, I had no idea it would take so long. I really thought I'd get through the whole book with the rest of the commission and the staff and village council before my term was.
I'm committed to doing that. Our staff's committed to doing that. I feel like we've been absent some direction, real direction or feedback from staff's perspective to you guys. Otherwise, maybe the understanding is everything's checked off up to a certain point.
Yeah, I think that was my understanding, is we'd gotten to a point, which is where the yellow arrow is, notwithstanding the new stuff that came in today. I thought we were in reasonably good agreement that that's how far we got.
And I don't think it's going to take long for us to kind of
No,
work through this.
I was going to say, it's only 3 items, so
It's
we
not
can.
substantial.
Yeah, I think it's good what you've done. I think the more people who look at this, and especially because you have the history of how it evolved to what it is, that's very helpful.
And we have expertise on this board. We have, those who have a little bit more, editorial eyes maybe. And it's always, and David, I'm telling you, I empathize with you because it is so difficult to type something up and put it out there for everyone to jump on with both hands, snarling teeth. I mean, trust me, I have been there. I can't tell you how many times I've had a document beat all to pieces. And that's not what this is, in my opinion. So again, you deserve all the credit in the world for doing that because...
It's a team effort. This isn't me.
Well, you got it started for us. You got it started for us. You took the initiative where there was an initiative, quite honestly. So thank you.
And I know we need to jump in, but I think the point here is there was a lot of redundancy in this document. There was a lot of language that was, which left gray for us, didn't give us clarity. It was shoulds, musts, coulds, all those and then we also agreed that then that's great for the applicant, and the applicant doesn't have clear direction. So that's a huge step, but I think what Alex is getting at, what we've said is there are some there's some completely missing subjects in our standards that none of this has bitten us to date. It maybe has made our job a little harder. It's maybe made it a little harder for the applicant, but there's some serious things out there that truly could bite us that we don't even address. And those are, we could spend another 12 months doing this, which this is important today, but we may need to take if we can't get through the point where we need to, big picture, we probably need to jump on some bigger items that are going to come up in the future, commercial, some of these other things. And that's probably where we need to direct our attention moving forward once we wrap up this section here. Because those are the things that
Fine
will
with
actually
me.
bite us.
We don't have to go to the end of section 3. We can stop at the end of my red lines and move on to other subjects.
I think maybe that's a good way we end the meeting today, is we're going to quit going round and round here like we've been doing and get into the numbers here. But maybe by the end of the meeting today, we can have an understanding that we pick a couple of sections that we think we need to really jump into. And then if time, we can come back and pick up on some of the other areas that we think we've missed. And just so you, there's over 20 check marks on my little handwritten edit that I went through. I wholeheartedly agree with those changes. So there are more checks than there are questions, and a couple things I wanted to have you provide, or if you could illustrate some of the reasoning or the terminology that some of us just don't have. So
In addition to my red marks and the staff's red marks, Roxanne has done a fair amount of review and has several to present to the commission today,
okay,
most all of which I agree with.
great. So there you.
They're not major, but I mean, they're like yours. I mean, they're just
Yeah.
discussion topics, if we have time.
Sure. Well, let's get going.
Okay.
Just the overarching things that, and I know I did recall having this discussion. I know John led some of it at the last meeting. For what it's worth, we prefer using the not appropriate, trying to be as consistent with not appropriate over not permitted. That's just our feeling. We feel like that's pretty common.
Can I ask a question real quick? Because that was one of the things I wanted to discuss. When they use the words not permitted in these standards, I guess I don't know what that means. I like not appropriate, okay? When we say not permitted, what does that mean? It has nothing to do with a permit, right?
Correct. So think about it. What does the HPC issue?
A certificate of appropriateness.
So appropriate is the right terminology.
Right,
Well, it's also described in section 1, so.
yeah.
Fine with me.
But the phrase not permitted is peppered throughout this document in certain places, and I didn't understand why it's there. so-
Volunteering?
What? For what? Taking it? No.
But see, there again, so there's something we can kind of go back and maybe once we get some more substantial stuff done, yeah, you're right, let's make it
Yeah,
consistent.
I didn't know if it was put in there for a reason, and since I'm new, I wanted to know what the reason was, but no.
I'm sure
Okay.
it's because it sounds a little stronger,
Okay.
maybe than not appropriate. Not appropriate, some might say, means I can still do it,
It's more polite.
maybe.
Well, according to the standards, I think it's division, section 1, it says that not appropriate is of the same class as must.
It's strong.
Yeah.
It is, it's strong.
So it's not like a should, it's like a must.
And see, you've really, really earned it, David, when you can start citing the specific sections.
Somebody's going to tell me I'm wrong, it's not in division 1, section 1.
That's how you know you've made it. I think we do like where we can in the document to, wherever possible. If there's, because we can't foresee every situation. I don't think it needs to be in every one, but, kind of piggybacking on the yellow box here on the front. I think where possible should probably be used sparingly, but let's not forget that it is a tool that we need to remember we can use when we need to.
The history behind that phrase was a way for me to try to get the commission to agree to move from shoulds to musts. In our previous discussions, we talked about that not being a great idea. If it's a must, it's a must, and if it's not possible, somebody will have to bring it to our attention. So I have no problem removing all the where possibles. It's sort of a given that you can't do something that's not possible.
And I want to say that we agreed with using the term compatible throughout, just so whenever we see that, but, we
Well,
concur.
compatible as opposed to congruous with?
Well, when we use congruous, we should be referring to the entire historic district. When we use compatible, we should just make sure it's relating to the structure or whatever is being done.
More specific.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
See how easy this is so far? Oh, I did. Let me see, I'm trying to follow my marks and then the marks that Maria did such a good job in trying to incorporate. So, number two, how do we all feel about should versus must in this instance? Again, I like should. That doesn't mean that someone has an opportunity, but they always have the opportunity to present some sort of finding. But you still have that to fall back on in case something is,
I vote for must.
okay?
I'm fine with must. I would just ask the question, since you prefer should, is there a reason factually that comes up a lot that is why you take that position?
I would also ask, is there a reason,
Why it's must?
correct? Is there
Because-
something that's come up?
Because some of the basic explanation of what our goal is in preserving the special character is about preserving what exists. And we happen to be, at this point, in existing houses. So preserving an existing house is the overarching goal at the detail level of what we're trying to do to an existing house. As soon as you say should, in short order, nobody will pay any attention to it. We've seen that happen.
Or this, with this particular standard, have we seen that?
No, I'm talking about in general.
In general,
That-
okay.
That what we're asking people to do is to preserve their houses. It's not, we hope you preserve your house. You must preserve your house. But otherwise, what's the point of coming in here? We know that when it says should, people will ignore it, especially builders who've been in here before. We can't enforce it.
And so that takes us back to what our overall standard is, right? And that's that congruity with the district as a whole. So if someone were to make a case, and they can, that even though I'm changing an exterior feature of this particular structure, it's represented 300 different times throughout the district. So that is why I do favor the should. And that doesn't mean that you're technically left without something to fall back, a fail-safe, in case someone comes back and tries to say, well, I'm changing this completely, and I'm taking this, and this feature from historic district and slapping it here. You could still find that, yeah, if something is there and it's prevalent, okay, fine, that's still not incongruous with a special character, but taking a mix match of everything and then slapping it on one.
I guess my point of view is that the historic district is very eclectic. If the argument is that they should be allowed to pick and choose from this huge variety of kinds and ages and sizes and shapes of houses, we need not have guidelines at all. If we say something must be done and someone comes in and makes a good case for why they don't want to do it that way, we can always approve it even if it says must.
That was my question. The burden, if it does say you must do something, the burden of proof then is on the applicant to say, I know I must do it, but I can't, and here's why, right? And then we have the ability to say, okay, we agree with you. Is that correct?
And they also have to prove their case too if it says should.
Well, yes,
But I-
but I think what David is saying, even though the language is a little stronger in must, we still have the ability to allow what they want. It's not like they're shut out.
So
If it says should, and we've run into this in my term here, if it says should, and they don't follow the should standard, all I can say to them is, would you like to do this and so? And they say no. That's the end of the argument.
Technically, we shouldn't even be saying that, but it's, at the end of the day, it could still be a should. They could say no, they that don't plead their case correctly, we deem as a group that whatever wall feature they're removing is essential or it's important to that feature, and then by doing that, they would be incongruous within the district as a whole, then we can decline to give them the COA for that piece. So we still have the ability to do it. It's just whether we're forcing them to say, not combative, but saying, you need to come plead your case and we're going to sit over here and we're going to hold you to this extremely high standard, or is we want to encourage you to come here. We want you to be congruous within the district. So it's not necessarily that we don't have the same bite. It's just a slightly different, it's almost a nuance in approach. If that makes sense.
And I agree, thank you, Richard, that we need to use must. I'm not advocating for not even some of these shoulds moving to a must. I want to make sure that we're on solid footing instead of just making it a process or a procedure, reasoning and why we're changing it to a must. The proper way to construct these is not such that you create it such that someone's essentially always, if they're wanting to make one little change, that they have to now, in essence, get some type of a variance from what the standard says. That's not the true intent behind historic district, and I'm going to call them what they really are, design guidelines, and not true standards. Again, that being said, I mean, I think, again, and David's right, we need to look at which section and what it's pertaining to. And I think none of us will disagree that exterior walls are a huge defining architectural feature of a structure, right?
Well,
That's right up there with the roof. That's right up there with the fenestration of doors and windows and things of that nature, right?
Totally agree, except we're talking exterior walls that contribute to the historic character. Not all exterior walls. We got a very narrow, and that's why I'm okay with must in that case, because that identifier is in there.
Are we going to be able to identify what that is my concern? What is?
Let me
Well,
go
that's
back
our
to
job, right? That's the vague area.
Go back to our own standards. Under Historic Preservation Commission, right at the beginning of the book, there's a page that talks about the principles of preservation. Well, right off the bat, the word preservation is there, preserve something. And then it describes the way you do that. It gives 3 primary descriptions: retain, identify, and preserve historic features and materials. This is right at the beginning of the book. And then right away, we start saying, well, you should retain them. Well, what are we trying to get you to do? We're trying to get you to identify, retain, and preserve historic features. If that's not what we're trying to do, okay, say should. Be nice if you did that. I mean, one of my biggest problems when I first came here was the discovery that the word should cannot be really enforced. I was told that point blank, and I saw it happen several times as I got my feet under me when I started. One of my goals in starting this process was to make it clear. If it's really not all that important, okay, should's fine. But if it's important, particularly something as important as the character of the historic district. If you have a house with a wall that contributes to the historic form and character of the structure, that's pretty important. That's what we're trying to get them to do. That's a must in my mind.
Section 3B2, right?
Yes, 3B2, yeah.
Okay.
No, that's not one we were trying to change to should.
Where are
that-
you? I'm not,
That
I
was
don't have-
leaving that as a must. You changed it to must, and
Yeah.
we were okay with that. Like,
Oh,
staff wasn't
I
trying to
thought-
change
I
that.
thought I was
It's
doing
not
that.
every,
like
it's
an
not
overarching,
every
I
should
want us
or
to-
must.
We gotta keep that in
All
our
right.
back of our minds while we're moving through this
Wh-
should or
which-
must debate for the,
Which one are you wanting to put back to should?
2.
There's,
It was B2, right?
That's the one we were discussing.
That's what I'm talking about.
yeah. You'll see some on the next page. It's not every should that you're trying to change to must that we have an
Okay,
issue with, or the other
I
way.
have to retract all my statements. I thought you were trying.
Oh, you need to.
No, no.
You need, so there again, that's why it's important, we look at the individual standard. I think it's going to be difficult for you guys. It's going to be somewhat arbitrary in deciding what is a exterior feature that's contributing to the historic form and character of a structure. But that's what the process is for, okay? Another thing we need to make sure, and staff's going to start doing a little bit better job helping with the facilitation of this document as we go through redlining, that all the must, if we change anything to a must or where we're missing them, they need to be bold. Same as not appropriate as well. And I know Kara's working on some other
Yeah.
grammatical things that we'll hope to try to migrate over without screwing anything up.
By the way, my red marks do not pick up changes to formatting at
Okay.
all. So that's, format it however you want.
Well, that's an easy find all and keep going through whenever we get to that point, right? Pam, you want to go over your comment here on 3?
It's mostly a question, at least the second part is, I'm just wondering if there were occasions where they wouldn't be required to use the same color that was already used. When we have additions or new construction, we have that palette that they can choose from, or even when they're changing the color of the entire structure. So that was just a question. Would we want to allow that palette to be utilized in those decisions, or would there not be occasions where that would be appropriate?
I think that's a good point, because I had a question on this. We have a whole section N that talks about paint. And I don't know why we keep bringing it up in each of these other sections when we have the whole section that talks about paint. So we're kind of duplicative, right? So I wasn't sure, and I was curious what anyone else thought about that.
And the best guess I can probably throw out to why it mentions that throughout here and there, it's just that to be more user-friendly, so you know, if you hit them with it 100 times, maybe they picked up on it versus if you
Okay.
just get them once. I don't
Okay.
know.
Certainly the scale and material, you'd look to replicate the original unless it can't be.
And maybe this is an option where if there's a color that's not in the color palette. I can think of one particular structure just over here. I know Richard knows what I'm talking about. It's the one that's, is that the color of Roxanne's shirt?
Oh,
It's not in the color palette, but maybe if they're keeping it original, so this standard could help them in presenting their case to do something that.
And when we say should be in the Pinehurst approved color palette, I like the words should or match any color in, because we oftentimes may say it's not in the palette, but it's a Sherwin-Williams that matches or whatever. So I like doing that. I think it gives them a little more flexibility.
It
You
gives us all
recently
that
ability. approved one that was a different
Yeah.
paint manufacturer, but it looked very
Exactly.
close to.
It's probably more often than not that it's not a Benjamin Moore listing.
Right, so should match a color in the palette versus should be in the palette.
I agree with that. However, I have a bigger nit to pick while we're picking this nit. I would say more often than not, applicants do not give us the color they're trying to match. They come in with a Benjamin Moore color, or they come in with some other brand of color. First, we don't have chips of the approved colors, much less of some other brand, and how well do they match? It seems to me that a basic application ought to at least include the color they're trying to match. Otherwise, it's not a complete application.
and I have been trying to get applicants to do that. Sometimes I just go and do that research myself. I've been trying to put that in the presentations, whatever
What
color
happened
they
if-
pick, the Benjamin Moore equivalent.
What would happen if you just gave it back to them and said, finish your application, we'll talk when you get done? I mean, you shouldn't
could
have
do
to do
that.
that work.
Sometimes I'm too nice, David, and I should put it back on.
Or you must.
So,
That's fine. We understand that's helpful for you guys when you're reviewing the applications, and if it makes the meetings go quicker.
it's become rote for me to say, okay, what color is it? Will you promise to match a color from, the trouble is I don't have a chance to look at those colors.
And if it is an objective determination, like paint colors, that is a authority that is delegated to staff to be able to make that determination.
It doesn't
But-
matter
but
if they
we-
match in the meeting, we're relying on staff to go back behind on enforcement anyway and double check at the end of the project to make sure they match. So,
Yeah, but the problem is if they choose two colors, we don't know what those colors are. We don't know if they go well together.
but if they said, I'm gonna match the exact color palette on the current house with the new siding, and it's gonna be a shade of white, which is 90% of what comes in front of us, we rely on staff to go back and make sure
Yeah.
it's a match.
Under that condition, no problem. But just because they pick two colors out of the approved color palette doesn't mean that we must approve them. They could look horrendous side by side.
Well, I agree, and we've had some where we've had renderings that didn't have sufficient detail, and we just said, look, we can't see what's going on here. You're
Yeah.
gonna have to come back and show us some more, you know?
We'll see what we can do. We'll make a more concerted effort.
I have been, again, trying to get them, instead of just the name of the colors, whether it's Benjamin Moore, Sherman-Williams, whatever, for them to actually give me paint sample swatches. So if it's one that's not Benjamin Moore, I can compare it and see which one on the color palette would be close.
Do you have a set of chips of the approved palette?
We,
be a lot.
I have a book of them,
We have about
but I
3
don't think it
books.
has
There's
all the
like
colors
7
in it.
palettes. There's 7 fan decks for, I know this.
But I
from-
have actually found some websites where you can put in the names and it pulls them up and puts them side by side. It's really
The
handy.
monitor is worthless, absolutely worthless.
It changes.
So is it
Same way if you
printer?
print something, yeah.
Yeah.
no.
So, I mean, you got to have the actual chip. I will add to my list of things to do to try to get a set of chips for all of us, so we'll have a tool to use.
Can I just say something? I think we just have to remember, it's their burden of proof to prove to us what they want to do. If we don't like the fact that we can't determine the nuance between 2 colors, then we deny the application. It's as simple as that.
Or continue it.
Or, right, exactly. But it's always, you know, a lot of times we'll say it's okay because we don't think it's going to be an issue, and we do that too. But it's always their burden of proof. So we just have to remember that.
Have you been moved? Have what they presented to you moved you enough to feel that you can
It's-
make a motion, right? If not,
Yeah,
then.
exactly, yeah. And in most cases, it's okay.
I
So-
don't know how we can say that. We don't have chips. How do we know what color it is?
Well, then you have to say you vote to deny. And maybe the other 4 of us will say we're okay with it, and that's just what happens. I mean,
Try and keep trudging through here if that's
Yeah.
okay.
I will say, I feel pretty firm about C1 being a should.
see,
Just because we're talking about congruity with the district. We just moved on. I think we discussed Pam's comment, and Roxanne had a similar, but we feel like we're,
Well, I guess I can only say that under no condition would I accept something which compromises the architecture and character of the structure that it's on. I would deny that every time.
and we would be overturned.
Well, I would be, because there's other votes. But if they're compromising, unless it's horrible architecture.
And it may be, we've had that, right?
There have been some horrible
Yeah.
houses. Anything they do to them would be an improvement. I'd be okay with that. But if you have a beautiful house and you're going to make a change that compromises that beauty, I would reject that.
And if we're talking about windows and doors are all over a structure. Maybe it's making a change that's somewhere on the house that's not, right? It's not a character defining area, it's not as visible, so therefore it's not terribly incompatible, but it's still prevalent in the district, you know?
I suppose that if there's any room to wiggle, it would be, what is it? What does it take to compromise the integrity of the existing house?
That's why I think having that flexibility with should is
Don't need the
more
should. You
appropriate.
don't need the should. The must works fine. The flexibility is in your ability to decide whether it compromises. If it compromises, you should reject it. If it doesn't compromise, you should approve it.
Well, it can still compromise and be congruous within the district.
That's the big thing.
So remember, that's our standard, we always gotta come back to that.
And other things come up, but we can't determine what they do on the interior, but sometimes those windows and doors are necessary for building code if they're making a change inside, so.
I have to say that the argument that the building code supersedes isn't the answer. There are all kinds of ways to solve problems that are okay with the code that are not what the applicant is proposing. And the one that comes to mind is the stairwell on the back of the house down in the middle of the village. They wanted to put a fire exit stair off the back of that building. I forget.
Agora, the bakery.
Yeah, and their reason was the code requires it. Sure, the code requires a stair, but not that stair. Try again.
You could say potentially what material and what color it could be, but that's it.
Not so. That's a perfect example. There are ways to add stairs to that building that did not look like it was compromising the historic nature of that building. They ended up withdrawing that, and they changed their plans, and they didn't do that. Never added the stair.
I don't
The
think,
shortfall in our detail on the commercial side there. That's
Good point.
case in point for some
Yep,
of that.
good point.
So.
so where are we on C1? Because it would be good if we can get through some of this without having the same discussion on should and must for each one of these.
Well, I
We
guess
know where David,
I would remove the last part of the sentence, even though I didn't red mark it, but since we're having this discussion. Everything we do must be congruous with the Pinehurst
I agree.
Historic District. We don't need that phrase
I
there.
agree. I totally agree.
So in terms of voting for this, I vote for must. Let's take a little straw poll.
So just removing must not compromise the architectural character or structure.
Right.
It achieves the same thing. I think the reason it's in there is just purely for guidance for the applicant, right? Just to help them out because most of these people are lay people. Okay. So it's going.
I think we got to make the choice on whether it's be a should or a must,
Oh,
right? Because that was just stopping the sentence after architectural character of the structure, right?
I think it was that. I
Yeah.
think it's to say, remove must not compromise the architectural character and just go with
Must be
must be congruous.
No.
That's not what I understood?
The opposite, it's the opposite.
Oh, okay.
The
We know
fir-
it must be congruous.
Well, that's what we're debating. Do we use
Okay.
should or must? And my vote is must, and
Okay.
There you go. Roxanne?
I'm okay with should in most cases, but in this case, I'll go with must, because again, we're talking architectural character. When we're doing that, I prefer must. I couldn't see you at my,
I would just say we got an even number.
oh,
And we're kind of going this way, so I was telling
Oh.
Angelique, good luck. Go ahead, Richard, what do you?
I'm should. And the only reason I'm saying that is because in most of these cases, if we say must, invariably in all these cases, someone's remodeling an old house, they're blowing out that wall, we always allow them to do that, provided they're matching the existing siding, the existing detail. So if we're must, 90% of the time, we're coming off that threshold, and we're should. And we want to make sure that's compatible and congruous within the district. So to me, should gives us more flexibility, and when there is a situation where we must, we can enforce the must. We can say, that is instrumental to the design of that building, the features, we're going to hold you to that standard.
And I totally agree with that. If we're talking about individual landmarks here, it needs to be a must, because you're saying that in most cases.
A portico or some, or
that-
gable
that
or a,
particular, there's a reason why this one individual structure needs to stay that individual structure. But there, as Richard mentioned, there are plethora of opportunities, and there have been throughout the 19 almost years that there's been a historic district here, where, there's common sense changes, lack of a better term, that do deviate from how the structure was, but, you still ride by and say, oh, it sure didn't damage the special character. So I just,
it'd be possible. Just try to cut through all this, because this is going to happen on every page.
I was just going to ask that.
Would there be a way to add a clause in the beginning, in section 1 somewhere, that says that it is the burden of the applicant to prove why something listed as a should is not,
any standard.
Can't meet it.
We don't need to differentiate between should and must at any standard.
but we
'Cause
don't,
they're all
we don't
standards.
behave that way. When we're sitting in here, we don't behave that way.
Well, it's all, as Roxanne said, is based on what's been presented to you, right?
And
It-
having that sort of overarching statement that makes it clear that the burden is on the applicant to show why they can't meet, whether it says should or must, why
Exactly.
they can't meet it,
Right.
is not a bad idea.
Don't and we as a commission ought to pay attention to that when we're reviewing applications.
And I would caution two things, you know, one would be, depending on, because again, this is just, everything's hypothetical, right? Depending on what that application was, if they checked every box other than one should, if you're looking to deny a COA based on one should, it better well be darn clear in the record and your finding precisely why, and I hope it's on solid footing so we don't wind up in court over that. That's just something I would caution everyone here. The other thing is, let's remember that we're really just trying to fix some areas here where we know we've been missing. If it's been working, let's let it work. Let's not change for the sake of change. If there's been something we've missed, we know that, to your point, 3B2, David, was something that's pretty darn specific that has some sort of true architectural character, right? That's something you can tangibly put your finger on, right? If we're altering windows and doors, maybe albeit slightly, maybe that's where we don't need to be as firm. Does that make sense?
Agree that that overarching statement is appropriate to have?
Yeah, we'll probably have to tinker with that for, you know, to have for the rest of the group review at another work session. But, I mean, I think that's something that we need to consider in the introductory.
I think it's a great idea. I think it should help staff. And again, you're putting more obligation, responsibility on the applicant to come to you with a cleaner file, more organized, will help you guys out. And yeah, I mean, that's probably the way to handle it. Because anyone can interpret these words to have different meaning to you, to me, to, you know. That's why we have multiple of us, because it all means something slightly different to us.
Staff can keep pointing that applicant back to that statement.
Yep.
Regardless of all the details, we'll go back to that every single time.
I think it's a
And
good idea.
remind them.
Well, actually, that's a significant burden on you guys, because now every case where the should comes into question, you have to alert them that they must be able to defend that.
I know that wouldn't change
that
any of my
anyway.
approaches that I've ever taken with any major COA applications. Because we put every applicable standard to them. We put every applicable standard in the staff report, whether it says should or must or try or we wish you would or we're going to, you know, tar and feather you downtown if you don't. I mean, we make sure it's there for them. Jack, I know you remember the old standards and guidelines, right? We would, and that's what they were called, standards and guidelines, because some of them were suggestive. Hey, you know, if you're a nice guy, you know, we'd like you even more. However, you got to do this, right? And I don't know how many hundreds of COA applications were reviewed under that document from, again, 2006 to 2019, but it worked pretty well. It was only challenged twice. Yeah. So
I don't know that that's a good measure. I hope we have a higher bar than that. We never got sued, so it works. I would rather say the historic nature of Pinehurst has survived. That's a much better bar for me. than
largely at the
just that
work
we
of this
didn't get
commission and
sued.
staff.
So in our should and must conversation, we really missed the one comment that Maria had on C1 was whether including surrounding trim was necessary to include, or,
Yep.
you know, and if it is, then
So I'm going
That
to
was her
cave in on
question.
the must because we got to get going. We got like 8 minutes
So let's
left.
keep surrounding trim. We're good. I don't
Keep
think
that there.
that's not worth wasting more time on.
okay, thank you.
What about the next number 2 with the must there?
Is our intent to go through every must, should?
Oh, sorry.
I mean,
No, that's good.
maybe it is.
That's good. That's good. Let's keep going.
I think they were okay with it because there's
Yeah.
no comment.
Right, my mistake.
Now I'm
Maybe
confused.
it is. If it is, then let's reschedule for a follow-up to this.
Think nothing. Loud substitute material inserted in 4, are we okay with that?
Where are you?
Number
the page.
4, C4 on the next page.
Or what?
Start of the third sentence,
Just
the
the
third
4,
line.
the main section 4.
Yeah, but
Material or an allowed substitute material? Was that where you were?
we've already
Alex?
reviewed that and you have no comments. Let's keep going. Let's go down to the greens and the purples.
There is a purple in
Yeah,
there.
that was purple.
Yeah.
So D is the first comment that,
No, 4.
We're still on
4D.
4, apparently.
No, not D.
Off
Because the
additions.
purple is something new to be,
Off
for
additions, David.
discussion.
oh, I see, should be.
Admittedly, the font's
the
small.
or an
when
allowed
you go with these
material.
review things, so.
Substitute material. We're still on the main section of 4, or an allowed substitute material. Was that your suggestion to add that?
Yes.
Okay.
When we say matching, what,
The main section 4,
Four.
the last line of 4,
Oh, I
before
see,
you
I
get
see,
to
I see.
A, the purple that says or an allowed substitute material, Maria had suggested that that be included.
when you say matching the original in material, I see that as not meaning the original material. I see it incorporating substitute material also. It's just you're matching the material as best you can, right?
I guess
You-
I'm really confused. If you're repairing an old window, repairing it, that means you're replacing a muntin or you're repairing a frame. You're not going to replace a wood frame with a fiberglass frame or a plastic frame. I don't think it would ever come up that you would repair a window that's part one material and part some other material. To me, inconceivable.
Well, it
that
says
would
repair or
Or replace.
replacement. See, it offers both.
Oh,
See.
I see, I see, I see.
Roxanne,
Okay.
I'm not
I'm
sure
okay
that
with it.
staff would interpret that the same way. When it says matching the original material, are you saying like for like?
If it's
Do you think
wood,
of
it
as
would
like
have
for
to be
like?
wood again.
And so I think that's why she was suggesting that an
Right.
allowable substitute material be included. And it
Okay with
adds
that.
clarity.
We're good.
It adds clarity.
Okay.
We got 1 minute.
Yay.
Must to a
Replaced or
should.
repaired in kind for wooden windows, 4A, and should be instead of must.
That's prescriptive enough. I could live with a must there if everyone else can, because it says wooden windows, street facing, they got to make a good enough case to change. We good?
So what?
Look at how we can
just-
move when
we
the
went back
clock's
to should
ticking.
or we went to must?
Must.
We're going back to must.
All right.
Vote me a should.
I know, I can see, this is like watching a pickleball game.
We just made more progress in the last 5 minutes than we did in the first 35.
Is somebody making note of these changes so
Yes.
I
Yeah.
don't have to
Yeah, we
redo
all
my
are.
red marks?
Yes,
Okay.
okay,
Just bought ourselves another minute, David.
What do you want to see now?
yes. From must-have to should-have on the divided lights.
What about street facing windows? Keeping, just, so if street facing windows have divided lights, replacement windows should have. So let's keep that same test of being street facing. If it's non-street facing, maybe it's okay, because as your beautiful example in your video and all your material you showed us is, you're thinking from that public realm. I'm going down the streetway, you look, you're like, wow, I can tell the difference that has true divided light and not
Help
simulated.
me with the street facing. If it's in the side yard and I can see it clearly from the street, is that street facing?
You can see it from the street. If
It should
a
say
normal,
visible
from a
from the
normal,
street.
a normal pedestrian, 5 foot 10 inch, 5 foot 8 inch human standing in the street, you can see it.
I'm okay with that.
And if somebody takes a tree down, and now you can see it,
I was going to break with staff. on
So street facing doesn't mean directly facing the
Doesn't
street
have
on a
to.
corner.
No.
It
It could
should
be
say
a side of the house I can see from the street.
Visible from the street rather than street facing, I think is a better wording.
Yep.
Okay.
okay? All right, let's stop there so we can get things ready. Let's keep this up next month.
Yeah, before we break, I want to thank everybody for putting up with my nitpickiness. But I think we're making good progress.
It takes time, David. And admittedly, it takes the, go ahead,
Do I have
adjourn.
to close it?
Yeah, go ahead.
And just say what, adjourn?
Yep.
Work session
Yeah,
adjourn?
is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I move to adjourn the HPC work session.
Motion from Roxanne, is there a second?
Second.
A Okay, Angelique, second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Work session adjourned.